what do we want to build? Well, of course, like every good marketing intern, I want a to-do app. This is how it works, and it will be auto-deployed via Humanitech to GKE and GCP. All right, amazing. Let's look at the GitHub Actions. And here's our beautiful to-do app. We have this is my first task, so we can add that. Perfect. And we can delete this. We even have some fancy statistics that nobody asked for, and it's built with a vibe coding workflow and deployed via Humanitech to GCP. So I swear there's no like fancy cutting. Those were literally this one sentence created to-do app for me. Everything else was done by this workflow here for me. Hey everybody, welcome back to a new episode, Building Platforms with Kaspar. And today we have something extraordinarily exciting. We're going to build a vibe coding platform. You always wanted to do that. You are going to get the experience of a Replit, of a lovable, out of the box, using the tools that you're using already, deploying immediately and directly to your GCP, to your Azure, to your AWS setup. And the best thing is everything is going to be policy compliant, IAM backed, with resources that actually meet the requirements of your enterprise. But the experience is going to be so simple that you can give that to your marketing intern and they can use that spark of creativity, build that application, test that new thing with their customers. You are going to be the hero. We are going to use the tools that you are using every day, like GitHub, GitHub Actions, Terraform, Kubernetes Platform Orchestrator, Claude Code, and Cursor. So you really have that end-to-end experience. And again, we're deploying to GCP, we're deploying to AWS, we're deploying to Azure. Are you ready? Let's go. Okay, so what are all of the things that we need to build a vibe coding platform? Well, first, we need a cloud account. Could be AWS, could be GCP, could be Azure, could be your private cloud. It doesn't really matter as long as it has an API endpoint that we can reach. So our cloud account is the thing that we are deploying into. No infrastructure, no vibe coding platform. Then we have Terraform. Terraform is a format for infrastructure as code, and it helps us to codify as code how you want that database to be spun up, how you want that policy to be configured. I'm a big believer in having everything as code. So Terraform here is our IAC of choice. Then we have Humanitech Platform Orchestrator. The orchestrator is essentially the backend of all of this. It helps us to orchestrate the infrastructure provisioning management, bringing the infrastructure up, bringing it down, calling the right Terraform at the right point in time, and orchestrating our deployments. That is really giving us that CLI and API endpoint that the AI can then consume to deterministically spin up the infrastructure. Then we have GitHub and GitHub Actions, and this is about versioning our code, making sure that the generated code can be stored somewhere, as well as GitHub Actions for the pipelines, which can run the tests, build the images, and then hand that over to the orchestration to spin up the infrastructure and deploy everything. And then we have Claude Code and Cursor. Claude Code here actually giving us the capabilities of generating things using LLMs, and on the other hand, we have Cursor as the interface, as the IDE. Okay, so Cloud Account, Terraform, Kubernetes Platform Orchestrator, GitHub, GitHub Actions, Claude Code, and Cursor. Let's have a look at all of those different components. Right, so the first thing that we need to deal with is like, hey, where are we actually deploying this into? And as I said, could be your cloud account, could be your private cloud. Like this here is my GCP account, standard GCP cloud account. And you can see that I have already set up a couple defaults. In this case, I've set up a Kubernetes cluster because I want to be able to, when I vibe deploy, just spin up a new namespace and be able to really, be really fast in having that service up and running. And I want to have the user to wait too long. This could be also like a serverless component. It doesn't really matter, but that's sort of the base that I've set up already. Now, apart from that, the cloud account is obviously where everything then, materializes and runs, but everything is configured actually using infrastructure as code. So here we have a repository that contains all of the different Terraform modules we're using. You can see that we have a definition for buckets, for namespaces, for service accounts, for pub subtopics, for Redis. And I could obviously add more. And you can see that this is really just a pretty standard Terraform. Here we have the main TF, we have the inputs, we have the outputs, exactly what you would expect from a Terraform setup. So those are essentially our templates and our infrastructure templates that are then used by the orchestrator to actually make sure we configure the infrastructure following all our policies. So the next component we have is the platform orchestrator. And the job of the orchestrator is essentially to take the request that comes in from the AI tool and actually call the right Terraform stuff, make sure it's up and running, make sure the infrastructure is configured, make sure everything is wired together and orchestrated. And if you look at how such an orchestrator works, so essentially the abstract request comes in, that's the request from the AI pair programming tool, in this case, Claude Code, that says, hey, I need a new bucket. And that makes its way through GitHub Actions, in this case, hits the orchestrator. The orchestrator analyzes what role-based access control we have given to that pair programming agent to make sure it doesn't go crazy and do some wild stuff in our GCP account. And it's analyzing where it's going. So in this example here, it's going to staging, and then it's figuring out what the right policies and infrastructure as code components are to use to then make sure the infrastructure is configured and is running correctly. So the orchestrator is again really that backend API that takes the abstract request that comes from the pair programming tool or the developer and matches this with the global rules by the organization, fuses everything together, makes sure it's orchestrating, it's running, it's secure, it's spun up, it's spun down, it's deleted, and it's giving us that really easy to use API. And that's really one of the core things here that enables this workflow, because it allows the Claude Code, in this case, to really know what it's doing. Very, very simple API structure here for the backend. That would be materially harder if we would do that pipeline based, or we would let Claude Code handle Terraform stuff. It would go wild and it would spin up all sorts of uncontrollable things. So this is the interface of the platform orchestrator. The orchestrator itself is also configured as code, but we can look at here in the UI. So what we're seeing here is that we've codified a couple environment types. So this is important because the orchestrator needs to know what environment we're deploying into, so it can then figure out what the right modules and infrastructure as code are that it's supposed to use to actually spin up the infrastructure and configure everything. So we offer staging, production, ephemeral development environments. Next, we have the resource types. Those are the things that Claude Code will then be able to just call. If Claude Code says, give me a bucket, right, then it's actually calling a resource type. So here we have different resource types, gateway, bucket, DNS, etc. And then we have the modules, and the modules, again, are the things that are actually pointing at the Terraform or whatever other setup we're using. Here for the bucket, it will actually say, use this Terraform that we just looked at to create this, and do that if certain rules are met. So for instance, if we're deploying to a development environment, if we're deploying to an ephemeral environment, we want to use this. But if we're going into production, we want to use production hardened and more secure infrastructure. Yeah, so this is pretty much what we can configure here on the orchestrator base. It's pretty straightforward. And then we're done with that. And we can look at the next bit. Yeah, so now we cover the cloud account, the Terraform setup, and the orchestrator. So next we need to look at how all of this fits together, right? And that means we need to look at the repository structure, and we need to look at the prompts that we are giving to the AI pair programming tool. And we need to look at the workflows, the GitHub workflows that then bind all of this together. So I've created this little repository called the vibe coding template. And you can really just take this and you can give it to Claude Code, and it will be able to act as a vibe coding system with all of the backend things that we have just looked at. Okay, so what do we see here? What does that actually do? Well, create a new repository. It's pretty important in my organization. And then we'll copy the template files from this repository, and we'll look at those template files, what they're doing in just a second. It will build the application that we've asked for, and then it will push to the orchestrator and will deploy everything to, in this case, the GCP setup that we just looked at. Yeah, so what does that mean? Well, Claude Code will use two CLIs predominantly. It will be using the GitHub CLI, and it will be using the HCTL, the Humanitech Orchestrator CLI, for all the infrastructure stuff. And so the first thing it will do, it will create that new repository, pretty straightforward here. And then we'll copy the template files. We have 4 template files that we need in this example. A Docker file for containerization, manifest file to tell the orchestrator what infrastructure we need. It then contains the GitHub workflow, and it contains the chart, because in this case we're deploying to Kubernetes and we want to have some Helm charts. I could probably let Claude Code figure out how to create these things itself, but you don't really want to do that because you want to meet the policy requirements of your organization. You probably want to have that shut down. make sure that on the first try, the containerization, all of these things work, because you don't want your marketing intern to wait too long, which is why we're copying those template files. Let's look at those files in a little more detail. Now, first, the Docker file, and that's pretty straightforward. It's really just helping us containerize that application that we've built and then push this to GCR, to the registry, so we can deploy that to a container system like Kubernetes. Next, we have our manifest YAML, and that's a little bit of a new format. It's just a YAML that tells the orchestrator what resources we need in general. So it's not environment specific. It doesn't say this is what we need for dev, this is what we need for ephemeral, this is what we need for staging or production. It just says, hey, in general, this application will need a queue, a bucket, a namespace, etc. And that allows us to have a really simple format for Claude Code or any AI pair programming tool to know how to ask for a new resource that is then created using the policies in the infrastructure as code of the organization. So this is sort of our menu that the orchestrator then receives and takes in. Next, we have our GitHub workflows. That's configuring how the CI pipeline is actually run. And we have 3. We have a deploy to default environment, and that is pretty straightforward. I'll show the structure in just a second. It's creating the project in the pushes to the image registry, creates the environment, does all of the scaffolding, etc. I'll show you a project map in just a second. There are 2 more workflows. We have the ability to create an ephemeral environment on git push. That's pretty cool. And then also to delete that ephemeral environment. And that's more like a developer workflow and goes beyond the marketing interns case, but it's good to have if you also have developers who want to rapidly test something. Let's look at the workflow of the GitHub action here. So pretty straightforward. If we push to main, then we are going to create a Humanitech project. So in the orchestrator for the infrastructure side, we're going to build the Docker image. We're going to push this to the registry. We are then going to deploy this via Humanitech to the Google setup. We are going to expose the load balancer, and we're going to receive a URL that we can then look at, and then our application is live. It's really simple. And finally, we have our charts. This is pretty much Helm charts that we can use to configure Kubernetes and add more things like annotations, etc. if we would want that in that deployment. Okay, let's recap. We've created the new repository. We've copied the template files, those 4, right? Docker file, manifest for the infrastructure, the GitHub workflow, and then the charts. And then we have given it like simple nudge on how to create the Node.js application structure. If you ask for something else, it can also figure that out. But that's how you actually generate the code. And then we commit and deploy. And so we're telling it that it should do that with git and git commit and push to origin main. And then we show how to get the URL. And you do that by just watching the action. We have a step in the action that will then, output the URL. That's something that we could refine a little bit more. So if you would want to make it more convenient for our marketing intern, we probably want to have a Slack app that just receives that via the API. And in this case, we're just using GitHub Actions as a little shortcut. Then also in this repository, we show Claude Code what resources are available. We could just have it call HCTL to request that information, what resources are available, but we want to save runs and make that a little more slim. So we're saying, hey, you can add storage and data, you can add messaging, queue, RabbitMQ, Kubernetes, you have ingress, namespace, service account. We offer Lambda, GPU, an API gateway, DNS, and then the resource output variables, how we are actually going to configure and assume this. Yeah, so this is pretty straightforward. How to do troubleshooting, etc. How to allow for customization and what are the success indicators. So is the repository created? Do we have the template files copied? Is the GitHub Actions running? Do we have the project? Is the Docker image built? Do we have the infrastructure provisioned? Is the app deployed to GKE? Do we have the load balancer IP assigned? And can we access the application? Yeah, that's pretty much it. And now we're ready to actually do a test run and check out our vibe coding app and act as this marketing intern who's going wild and super creative. Let's go. All right. And now I am a vibe coding marketing intern. I'm fueled with creativity and want to get to test interesting applications. And I am going to use Claude. Would probably give that to my intern, not in an IDE, but in the Entrophic console or something. That's absolutely possible as well. I'm just going to do that here so you can follow the code and what's happening. So I'll just, fire up my terminal here and start Claude code. And once we're done, perfect, I'm just going to tell it I want to vibe code using these instructions. And I'm just going to point it at this, and boom, here we go. And it's now going to read this, and it will very soon hopefully tell me I am ready. A legal operation on direction. Yeah, now you can see that it is reading this, and it can say, okay, perfect, I've read the instruction, I'm ready to go. What do we want to build? Well, of course, like every good marketing intern, I want a to-do app. That's obvious, right? Okay, so I want a to-do app is a very, bare bone request here, but that's something that Claude Code can absolutely deal with. And now it's going to do those things. It's going to generate the code, copy all of the templates, manifest, etc., everything we've just learned. And now we can just see and watch what happens. Okay, so it's created the repository here, simple to-do app with add and remove functionality. It's copying the template deployment files, as it should, so that's great. Now we're implementing the to-do app functionality, and we're using Node.js to do that. All right, looks like it's done. We have the to-do app deployed. Here's what happened. I created the repository in the right org, perfect. Copied all the deployment files from the Vibe template, good. Built the complete to-do app, committed and pushed to the main branch, okay. Deployment status, it's now running here. Let's just copy this so we can have a look at the GitHub actions. Watch the wait for service and show URL to look at the URL, and that will take 5 to 10 minutes. That's actually very conservative. It usually takes like 2-3 minutes. And here we have our to-do app features. This is how it works, and it will be auto-deployed via UATech to GKE and GCP. All right, amazing. Let's look at the GitHub actions. All right, here's our GitHub actions. It was just finished. We checked out the code, authenticated, we pushed the image to the registry, we provisioned the infrastructure, everything is done. And so we can go to the wait for service and show URL, and our app is ready. So we can just copy that and have a look. And here's our beautiful to-do app. We have this is my first task. So we can add that, perfect. And we can delete this. We even have some fancy statistics that nobody asked for. And it's built with a vibe coding workflow and deployed via UATech to GCP. So I swear there's no like fancy cutting. Those were literally this one sentence created to-do app for me. Everything else was done by this workflow here for me. Let's actually check that even more complex and ask it to add the functionality of attaching an image to such a task. Because at that point, the pair programming tool and Claude Code need to actually understand that it needs to create a bucket on the infrastructure side to wire all of this up. Let's do this now. Okay, so we're back here in Claude Code. I want to add the ability to attach a photo that I upload to a task. Before you do this, tell me how you would approach this task. Let's just do this because I want to figure out, like, is that thing actually capable of reasoning through? And the interesting thing that would fascinate me, if it would be able to actually figure out, hey, like I need to add a bucket, I need to add the variables, etc. Okay, so add multi-dependency and file upload backend. Okay, whatever that means. So let's go through this here. Current state. Now I want to have photo attachment in the backend. I need to file upload handling storage. Boom! It's figuring out that I need storage. So a couple backend changes, obviously. Front-end changes make sense. Data model update also makes sense. Storage strategy, a local file system or cloud storage. Exactly. You have your intake resources available. Clever you. Implementation order. Boom, 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 boom. Questions before implementing. Should photos be required or optional for to-dos? Any file size typical restriction? Should we use local storage? Okay, fantastic. Okay. So the marketing intern, we wouldn't have the marketing intern ask this, but in this case, should photos be required for optional? It's optional, only JPEG, and then let's use a bucket with GCS. All right, let's go. I mean, this is crazy, right? It's figuring out all of these things, and because we have this wonderful structured backend, it's capable of, just adding a bucket now, and that's absolutely fascinating. Okay, well, yes, whatever. Let's just go. Add dependency in GCE, create photo upload middleware, to do creation, blah, blah, blah. if it will do this on the first try, like that would be wild. Yeah, so look here, manifest YAML is figuring out that it just has to update and say, give me a bucket of type bucket, and then we're done. Okay, now we're just updating the front end with the photo upload UI. That is great. All right, we're done. And now we're testing the implementation and we're pushing. So we git commit and we push to the main branch and we're done. So let's have a look what we did. Photo attachment feature successfully implemented and deployed. Optional JPEG uploads, photo preview, add photos, thumbnail display, very good. And it figured out, and I find that so crazy that it figured out that it needs to have a bucket to store these things somewhere. It figured out that Humanitech can add a bucket that's available. So that's so crazy. So crazy. Like that absolutely blows my mind. So let's have a look at the action running here and then finally at the result. And now we're looking at the GitHub Actions that is running here. Now we just pushed and now we're getting to the point where we're provisioning infrastructure. So it's going to add that bucket. All right, now let's have a look here. Setup, GKE, install. Where is our URL? There we go. Let's open this. All right, now let's check this out. Here's our to-do app. I want to upload something. My first beautiful JPEG. And I'll choose a file and it correctly only shows me the JPEGs. You see the beautiful staircase in my house. You always wanted to see that. Add and boom, we're done. It worked. We're saving this here and we even, I just checked this, have a health endpoint and we have a bucket called second call demo bucket and bucket is configured and everything worked. What the actual heck? It's so crazy. Cool. Yeah. So what do we have? We have a to-do app that we created and then updated in only 2 commands. We have an end-to-end workflow all the way from, a Claude code and cursor here on my local machine and into the cloud deploying using GitHub, GitHub Actions, Terraform, the Humanitech Platform Orchestrator, the Google Cloud Platform, etc. This is actually something that you can use, and this actually something that works super well, and it's actually something that then also is policy compliant, works with all of the checks and balances you have in your organization. I can actually go ahead and now delete my application as well to clean up. Great. Now delete this and boom, it's actually going in and it's going to delete that for me. So this worked super well and is actually absolutely fascinating. There are a couple things that you would want to do if you want to actually give that to your marketing intern. Like, first of all, the intern can probably not use your cursor Claude code combination. So you'd want to do that in Anthropic's console, for instance. You can just build a little app there. They are offering that. And you probably also want to have that connected to your Slack account or Teams so the user can directly interact, receive the URL, etc. This is great, not only for your marketing interns, but also for your developers. So I hope this helped. I'm going to link the vibe coding template that I created here in the comments and in the information section. And so you can actually try this. If you have questions, if you have other setups that you want to see me build, reach out. If you have an interesting setup that you want to show to the world, also reach out. Thank you so much for your interest. Thank you for following. See you very, very soon.